All right, let's start up. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'd like to call to order the Cumberland School Committee meeting Thursday, September 27, 2018 at 7:36 p.m. and ask that you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Hello, welcome again. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Pleasure of the committee. Mr. DeMonica makes a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Not everyone at once. Second by Mrs. Goggin and Mr. Denon. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 5-0. I would like to state for the record that Mrs. Friedman and Mr. Fiorillo are not present at the meeting tonight. Next item on the agenda is the student government report. Student activities. Come up to the microphone, state your name, your grade, and give your report. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ty Skeldon, and I'm the senior class president.
I'm Stephen Shalino, and I'm the senior class vice president as well as the student government secretary.
So as far as what we did this month, student government kicked off the school year at a government meeting Saturday, August 18th at Cumberland House of Pizza at the end of the summer to go over all of the events for this year that we're planning. During our first week of school, we had some meetings in advisory where both student government and the administration had a chance to provide introductory information to the student body. The official first student government meeting was held on Tuesday, September 18th, which was supervised by our advisors, Ms. Hall and Ms. Berthium. In the past, we've held our meetings at 6 p.m. in the CAF, but in order to get a bigger outcome, we hold our meetings after school now, like directly after school. We discussed the events coming up in October, and we worked on designing our class's Spirit Week t-shirts. Finally, on September 24th, student government assisted parents in finding their children's classrooms and navigating the school at Meet the Teacher Night. Thank you.
As for the future, we have exciting plans for October. Ty and I will be hosting another student government meeting to open to the whole student body on October 9th. We can finalize anything necessary for Spirit Week and begin to look ahead for our future turkey basket event. Spirit Week this year is October 22nd to the 27th. We added a new after-school dodgeball game on Monday. So now after-school activities go as followed, which is dodgeball, lip sync, powder puff cheerleading and football, class clash, the homecoming football game, and the homecoming dance on Saturday. The dress-up days for the week are America Monday, Sports Team Tuesday, Hawaiian Wednesday, Class Color Thursday, and School Color Friday. At the end of October, we begin our turkey basket program. We will be collecting canned goods and other foods to help put together turkey baskets for less fortunate families in our community. Our goal this year is at least 80 turkey baskets, but hopefully 100, even though it says 80. And we are continuing to work hard to create a more exciting and positive atmosphere at CHS that all the students can come and enjoy coming to every day. We appreciate your time and your support. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to get in on that. What was that? Dodgeball. Thank you. I had a mind blank. The school committee would like to get in on that game. Some dodgeball.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll create a fifth team.
Everybody in the audience is invited. Thank you, guys. Excellent job. Have a good night. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Approval of minutes for the regular meeting, 9/13/2018. Approval of minutes for the executive session, 9/13/2018. Pleasure of the committee. A motion? Mr. Denner makes a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second? Second by Mrs. Goggin and Mr. Hess. All in favor? Against? The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the report out of executive session meeting. Report out of executive session meeting for 9/13/2018. We did not have any votes, so I need a vote to seal the minutes of the executive session meeting on 9/13. Pleasure of the committee. Mr. Hess makes a motion. Do I have a second by Mr. DeMonica? All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, superintendent report. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of items this evening. I was hoping that Susan Kelly, who is past president of the Cumberland Lincoln Rotary Club, she is still associated with that organization and has worked very hard with our students in the high school in the um, creation and leadership of the Interact Club. Unfortunately, she was called out of town for a meeting and actually is in New York and sends her regrets. She's not able to be here this evening. So hopefully we can get her here sometime in the near future. Just wanted to give everyone an update on the school construction bond referendum. Lots of planning has taken place to get some information out on the referendum and the vote that will be taking place on November 6th. Actually, Bob Shaw and I will be going to PTO meetings together to talk about the referendum. And it was interesting how that.
Can we switch his microphone? Is it? It's not the microphone? Okay, sorry about that, Mr. Mitchell.
So I can keep going. Okay. So
Okay.
it was interesting how this relationship started. Part of our communication plan was for, in addition to doing Bob Talks, and we've had students participate in that, and sending out letters and creating brochures and doing an insert for the Valley Breeze. One of the things that we wanted to do was, have meeting with the PTOs to share information with as many individuals as possible to raise their awareness about this. And we were already planning those. And then Bob Shaw called the office and asked for the contact information for PTO presidents because he wanted to speak to at the PTOs about the referendum. So I asked him, well, do you want to do it together? So he said he would love to do it together. So he and I are planning to meet with all of the PTOs to provide as much information as we can about the referendum, not only the state $250 million referendum, but Cumberland's $83 million request. And and I also, by the way, last night, McCourt Middle School had their open house. I attended that open house and was able to provide a room full of, there had to be a couple hundred parents in attendance, and I was able to provide information about the referendum. So we have I think, a really good plan to get the word out. And one of the things I wanted to mention was that there is going to be a town forum on Wednesday, October 17th at 7 o'clock in the high school auditorium. And actually, Mr. DeMonica reached out to the General Treasurer's office, and we're hopeful that Mr. Magazzina will be able to attend to provide some information from his perspective as the General Treasurer. So lots of work planned between now and November 6th to get the word out on that. So last but not least, I just wanted to update everybody on where we are with the school start time initiative. And most importantly, I wanted people to know that we haven't forgotten about that. And that is still something I think that we have a responsibility to pursue, given all of the research that we know exists on school start times and the fact that especially high school students aren't getting the required amount of sleep that they should be getting, and it affects their lives in so many ways. I was invited to a meeting at the State House by Representative Julie Casimiro, and as you may recall, Representative Casimiro was the person who chaired the School Start Time Study Commission. In fact, I shared that report with all of you in my recent communication with you. And 2 districts were invited to attend that meeting with Representative Casimiro, North Kingstown and Cumberland. And here is what we're hoping will happen. Representative Casimiro is going to be in contact with MIT, the company that created that algorithm that will hopefully be able to help us determine maybe some more efficiencies and and a routing system. And so a meeting is going to be scheduled, and hopefully we will be able to invite a representative or representatives from the bus company to attend that meeting with me so that we can have a conversation about, a potential relationship with them. Now, here's the thing. I asked, is it going to cost us anything to be a part of this process? And Representative Casimiro said this, that if this algorithm can save us money, or they're able to save money with the algorithm, then they would get a percentage of whatever is saved. If we are not, and they go through the process, and it's determined that we cannot save any money, it will not cost us anything. So there is no risk for us. And the thing that I stressed in this meeting was the fact that we need to make a decision sooner rather than later, because as we have discussed, having the money to do this is one thing, to create a later start time for the high school. I mean, having the money is one thing, but educating the public is just as important. I would say equally important. So of course money is important. It can be cost prohibitive. However, getting information out to the community, answering any questions that they may have, sharing information about the science behind it, making sure that everybody understands the benefits of making a move like this, that is as important as having the money to do it. So the bus company will be a part of that conversation, and I will keep you all updated as we move through this process.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr.
Any
Chairman.
questions from the committee? Next item on the agenda is chairperson's report. So as I look to stack stuff under the chairperson's report and going through the agenda, we got the bus company, we got the update from Mr. Mitchell. So I figured I'd give Mr. Matt Campanelli, Matt, come on up, a call and give an update on school sports. Welcome.
How you doing? Thank you. I just quickly wanted to go through some of the sports, and kind of dawned on me some of the things we have done over the summer into this year. And just tonight, actually, it occurred to me that we put in new speakers at Tucker Field, which makes a big difference on quality of sound and spectator appreciation of the event.
I can hear them at my house.
Yeah, so we've tried to put a governor on the knot because they're actually stadium speakers versus stereo speakers. I got them from a company in Texas who specializes in stadium, and high school football in Texas is a little bigger than Rhode Island. So when I said two, they said two should do it. Probably one would have done it, but we're trying to control the volume as we get used to the new system. But that was a combination of the youth sports groups, student government, and the athletic department working together to improve Tucker Field, which is a town/school/recreation facility. So it was a good collaborative effort on that part. And then just as the fall kicks off, we've had a good start to the fall. Some teams moving up to Division I with some great success. Girls tennis just won their second or third match in Division I. They start a little slow because between the heat and the rain, they played about one match the first month of the year, and now we'll have 3 or 4 a week for the next 3 weeks. But moving up is tough, and they're handling it well after 2 years of being state runner-up in D2. Now they're holding their own in D1. Probably the highlight of the high school sports season has been our boys soccer team, who since the first game, which was a 1-0 loss, hasn't lost a game yet. First place in Division I, locked a playoff seed up, and I think one more win might lock up a home field playoff game, which is always good. And that's sort of running down the list. Girls soccer won last night, playing now against South Kingston. Boys football has looking to get their second division win tomorrow. In addition to tomorrow night being football game, it'll also be a parent appreciation night. So we have about 100 teachers from the high school, or not parent, teacher appreciation night. So that was organized by Mr. Costa, and we've got about 100 staff coming to the game. They're going to do a little cookout and grill before the game, and then actually watch it from the end zone. So trying to expand and include community, connect the students, the town, the residents, the parents, and now bringing in the staff and faculty into our programs as much as we can. And then just today, actually, looking at middle school sports was probably the best day in the history of middle school sports, at least for me. One of my goals coming on was to help bolster both middle schools, but also bring the competitive level of McCourt sports up. And today, North Cumberland soccer played McCourt soccer, both boys and girls. And the girls' game we did here at the turf with a triple header with the varsity and JV game, and it was a 1-1 tie, which historically speaking for North Cumberland and McCourt to tie is, I don't think has happened probably in at least a decade. And that it's not because North is down, it's because McCourt's is built back up. And both in the boys, North won 4-3 down at Diamond Hill, but it was a penalty kick that the McCourt athlete missed that would have tied it. So there's it's just good to see McCourt soccer, McCourt cross country, North Cumberland sports, both middle schools doing well. And I think a lot of it is some good coaching, some consistency, and just a concerted effort between the principal, the school, the athletic department to keep those kids competitive and also keep North as successful as it's been. And also we do a lot outside of the lines and the whistles. So I brought a student with me tonight, not to take up too much time, but Brendan is one of our baseball players here at the high school. He's a left-handed pitcher. He'll be at the top of the rotation for certain this year. But he also does a lot outside of the field. So in his off season, he's doing a community service project, and I'll let him talk about it. So, and he's also showing me up by dressing a little better. But
I love it. Shirt and tie.
Yeah, he's ready to go. So I'll let him talk about it and just introduce himself and go.
Thank you, Mr. Campanelli.
Good evening, everybody. I am running a charity event called Knock It.
Hold on. What was your name?
Brendan, right?
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm running a charity event called Knock Autism Out of the Park. It is a home run derby fundraiser. It is going to be at Diamond Hill Park Sunday, October 21st. I am raising money for the Cumberland Challenger Little League division. They are working to build a new field. Half of the proceeds from the event will be going towards the Cumberland Challenger division, and the other half will be going towards Autism Speaks. I'm opening the floor to any board members that have any questions about the event.
Just reading it through real quick. So explain home run derby fundraiser. So $20 participation fee. So if I show up, I get to try to hit home run. Is that how does that work? Explain to me. What's the participation fee?
So the participation fee I had a registration form. I forgot to bring the registration forms tonight. But you fill out the registration form and either mail it back to me or hand it to me if you ever see me anywhere. And you get to come. You're allowed 10 outs, so every batted ball that is not a home run is considered an out.
There we go. Okay.
And so you get to hit as many home runs as you can within 10 outs.
I think this is great. I don't think my shoulder can last 10, but
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
do you have an over 50 division?
Speak for yourself, Mr. Mitchell. Yeah. Speak for yourself. Yeah. All right, this sounds great. And the date again is Sunday, October 21st, 9 to 11 at the Diamond Hill Park. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Goggin.
I've been hearing a lot about the field that the Challenger League's starting to raise money for, so I'm really excited to see that it's starting, and really happy to see you're doing this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just
Mr.
one more
Mitchell.
thing. There may be some people who might not be able to participate in one of those categories. If somebody wanted to make a donation, we could just go ahead and make it to you somehow.
Yes, of course. We welcome all donations, and spectators are welcome to come to the event.
Excellent. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Mr. Campanelli, the freshman football, how's the attendance been? Enrollment?
Freshman football, just the participation.
Yes.
We're at, I believe, 35 the last time I checked,
Good.
right around there.
Participation last year was down, so it's stronger this year.
Yeah, I mean, just by a few bodies, but not. I
Okay.
mean, overall, it's been as high as 40, never lower than 30. Probably one of the large. Our football program is one of the largest in the state. As the numbers are dwindling, as concussion, reports come out, but we've done a lot with investing in helmets and new technology, things like that. So we bolster approximately between 80 and 90 players a year, but from freshman to senior, and enough to keep a healthy program alive and build. And so it's a well-behaved group. It's well coached, well staffed, and it's just a good. This year's particular freshmen noticeably are well-behaved, which I guess freshman boys can be a little bit mischievous at times, but this particular group has not given me any headaches in the wellness this year. Welcome.
Excellent.
I think with Brennan's fundraiser, you can always do the Little League field too, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yes.
Instead of the.
Thank you.
But
I
no, thank
appreciate
you
that.
again.
I appreciate that input.
If anybody wants to, know about schedules, games, anything like that, I'm happy to send that stuff along, and you're always welcome at Cumberland sporting events. So thank you.
E-ball.
For all
Yeah.
the support.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Campanelli. Any further questions, committee? All right. Thank you again. Next item on the agenda, reports of standing committees. Payment of bills. Mr. DeMonica.
Mr. Chairman, there was no payment of bills tonight.
Thank you. May as well take the next item as well, Mr. DeMonica.
Right,
Fiscal
Mr.
Management Subcommittee update.
Mr. Chairman, we did meet tonight. We did get an update from Mr. Pignano in regards to the 2018 budget results. We talked a lot with Shauna Spillane from Sedesco about the overdue balances and how the school committee can come up with a way of doing new IDs with barcodes to try to collect the money that the students are running through the line and charging when either have no money in the account or they're using someone else's PIN. So we are trying to update that and resolve it so that going forward, the lunch account remains in the black versus the red when it comes to collection from the students. And mainly it's the money owed to us is from the Cumberland students only. BVP and Rise Academy paid their bill in full. So the balance is due with Cumberland. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. Next item on the agenda is Policy and Procedure Subcommittee update. With Mr. Fiorillo being absent, Mr. Hess is going to fill this section. Mr. Hess.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. We did meet policy on Tuesday of this week. We discussed 4 different policies in general. I'll go through them in order. J1, early entry to kindergarten and first grade. This policy deals with aligning our kindergarten and first grade entry policies with state law. So it would set the kindergarten entry date to September 1st in accordance with the Rhode Island state law. And it clarifies some other language in the first grade entry. That passed on a vote of 3-0, if my memory serves, Mr. Denon. Thank you. The I-13 high school proficiency grading policy deals with some modifications that the administration requested with regard to retakes. So this policy does not eliminate retakes. I know there's been some conjecture online about this proposed policy change. It does not eliminate retakes, but rather than having a blanket allowance for retakes, it leaves retakes at the discretion of the teachers. So it is an option available, but the idea behind the policy and practice that will back this up is that teachers will give students multiple opportunities to evidence that they are proficient, and if a retake is necessary for a test, then that would be at the teacher's discretion, with the understanding that the teacher should be in the best position to understand whether a retake is warranted in that situation. And I believe that also passed on a vote of 3-0, Mr. Denon. Thank you. You apologize, I didn't take notes because I wasn't anticipating doing this. And then J21, the FERPA policy for those students who have reached the age of majority, is some updates to this policy. This deals with students who have reached the age of majority, which is 18. They are now legal adults from the state standpoint, and it clarifies what information can be given to parents in situations like that. So that's just clarifications to that policy. And as I recall, that also passed on a vote of 3-0. And then the last two policies that we talked about, I-6 and I-10, which we won't be voting on, but we did discuss. Dr. Rachel Santa and Kyle Santos came in and gave a presentation of a draft policy that would incorporate our field trip policies into potentially one cohesive policy with the specific aim of ensuring that special education students are included as part of any field trip planning. There's been some issues in the past where field trips have been planned and special education students and classes haven't been included, or the field trips haven't necessarily been planned with an eye towards accessibility requirements. So there is federal law under the Americans with Disabilities Act that does require accessibility and thought process behind ensuring that special ed students are not excluded from any type of school-sponsored field trips. So that policy is a draft at this point. It's something that we saw a draft of. We'll have further discussions in the coming days and weeks.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Hess. Very detailed. Next item on the agenda, Achievement in Communication Subcommittee Update. Mr. Denon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hess has one heck of a memory since he didn't take notes at the meeting. I did take notes in my.
He's under 50.
The Achievement in Communication Subcommittee did meet earlier this week on Tuesday night, and we had two main topics on the agenda. The first one was a discussion about the Cumberland High School leadership transition and principal vision. This was, and the other one was about homework, district homework policy. So the first one was led by Mr. Costa, who's our new principal at Cumberland High School. And we talked about, actually there's quite a bit of change in the leadership team at Cumberland High School. So we talked about everyone's role, mostly Mr. Costa and Mr. Sullivan and Mrs. Delfino, and how they're all working together. One topic was the guidance department, which is no longer called the guidance department. It's now the school counseling department. So it's time to update all your notes and address books, but it's the school counseling department, and so they're going through a rebranding, and Mr. Sullivan is heading up that effort. And Mr. Costa talked about how he's working with the guidance department to get updates and help them out weekly with meetings and other things that they're doing. So we talked about Cumberland High School and how it's the district's in the district strategic plan to be a top 5 school district, right? So that's we set that goal as part of the strategic plan. So as part of that, the high school is looking to be a top 5 high school in the district, or 5 or higher, right? And we talked a lot about what measures we would use to consider ourselves a top 5 school district or a top 5 high school. And we also talked about about pathways for students. One important topic was why some students don't graduate, right? Our graduation rate is higher than the state average, but it's still not as high as it should be, or we feel it should be. It's not 100%. So we talked a lot about what factors might go into the reasons why a student does not graduate after 4 years at Cumberland High. And we all recognize that more work needs to be done in that area. So one of the things we talked about is trying to get at some data and possibly kind of compiling data to figure out what the issues are, and then that will help inform how we address them. One of the issues we know is that sort of our course catalog is not appropriate for all students. So that's like an ongoing thing that'll be evolving. We know that we're bringing in pathways and CTE. That's another thing that Mrs. Delfino has been working on, and we've talked about that at length in this committee. So we talked a little bit about it the other night too. The other main topic of the night was homework, and this was sort of an effort just to kind of, from a high level, talk about what the district what the experience of students is in terms of homework, depending on their grade and their school. And we didn't really get down into many details, but I'd like to just push us towards answering the question: do we need a homework policy? Other districts have homework policies that we could use as a guide, and it's just worth asking that question. So we just talked about not only our own experiences with our own children, but Mr. Mitchell shared some policies from other districts and a couple of articles about what the research says about homework and how it may not be as valuable as in the lower grades as we might think. And it gets more valuable as students get older. Things like that. When students do their homework, do they do it in school? Sometimes there's opportunities to do it in school, and instead of bringing it home. And in that case, it's not really homework, right? It's extra work they're doing, but it's not done at home. So we still have a lot, I think, to dive into there. We didn't make any decisions or anything. It was really just kind of a informal but formal discussion. And we also we have a list of some future topics to talk about. I think the election's coming up in November, so some of us won't be on the committee after that, and I'm hoping to hand it off to whoever takes it over, where they can pick up the ball and start running. So because I won't be on the committee after November, whenever election day is. So 12? No. 6. Thank you. Any questions?
The update, Mr. Denon. Next item on the agenda, comments from the public. Anyone who would like to make a comment, step up to the podium, state your name. Hello, welcome.
Hi, thanks. I'm Heidi Waters. I just wanted to make a brief comment regarding the J1 policy for early kindergarten. It's my understanding that the policy will not allow for waivers for children to enter kindergarten early. And I just wanted to encourage the committee to consider allowing children to enter kindergarten early, perhaps doing a different kind of testing for children to enter kindergarten early. My reasoning behind that is that there are children who are ready for kindergarten, and by not allowing them to enter early, they tend to, I'm speaking from personal experience. I have a gifted daughter who probably was ready to enter kindergarten, but as a parent, I chose not to. And I think a lot of parents probably would make that choice to not have their kids go to kindergarten early, but to have a blanket statement that they're not allowed to, I think would do a disservice to a small part of the population, but still a few children anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Waters. Anyone else? Just come up. All right. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, public hearing, reading of amended policies. Mr. Hess, from memory.
Okay, so I would make a motion to read the following policies into the record: J1, early entry to kindergarten and first grade; I13, high school proficiency grading; and J21, the FERPA policy for those students who have reached the age of majority.
Thank you. Would anybody like to, so the next section is public comment in relation to any of the amended policies, if you would like to come up. I know you already did, Mrs. Waters. Would anybody else like to come up and speak about the amended policies? Hearing none, we'll call that closed. Next item on the agenda, what we're going to do here, if the committee doesn't mind, if anybody does not mind me doing this, I'm going to skip, we're going to come back to old business, and we're going to jump over to new business. No problem? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Adams, I don't need a vote on that, do I? Just to skip. I'm gonna bypass old business, come back to it, and jump right to new business. No problem. Okay. Thank you. Jumping into new business. Next item on the agenda, discussion with Durham School Services regarding bus routes. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a few guests with us this evening. Steve Schmuck is the Vice President of Northeast Operations for Durham. Francisco Montero is the area general manager for Durham services. And of course, you all know Paul Neves, who works with us on a daily basis regarding transportation services for the Cumberland School Department. And Steve is going to, share some information with all of you. And I think it's important to let you all know that we have been meeting frequently. We've actually had 2 meetings with Steve Francisco. And Paul. I'm in frequent contact with Paul, and Steve has been, and Francisco and Paul have been working to resolve some of the concerns that we have been getting in my office. But I know that you are privy to those concerns as well, and I have learned some things as a result of our conversations that I think you will find beneficial. But I think the single biggest reason why they're here today is to provide you with some, I think, helpful information about the services that they provide, and I think some of the tools that they use in their work, and B, to share with you some of the solutions that they have created to resolve some of those concerns. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Steve and Francisco and Paul. I think Steve is going to share a presentation with all of you.
Hello, Steve. Oh, please. Yeah. Get cozy.
Hear me? Okay, excellent. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Superintendent Mitchell, thank you so much for having us here.
Oh, Steve in Francisco.
That's correct.
What was your title, Steve?
I'm the region manager for the New England region. Francisco is the area general manager for Rhode Island.
All right, thank you.
So
we know Paul. We know Paul.
and Paul, a valuable member of our team. And so thank you very much for having us here today. I definitely understand that there has been concerns that have been raised, some routes that either weren't timely or needed to be modified or changed with the new school year, the startup. We tried to address those quickly. And certainly, I believe we've got really good plans in place and a lot of actions that have already been taken. And I want to just talk about some of those briefly. But as Superintendent Mitchell said, I wanted to kind of share with you some of the tools and some of the things that we have available to us to confirm, validate, and look at good resolution and some of the technologies we have with data points, and then share some of that with you guys. If I got the clicker, I forgot. So our actions and follow-up. So on this slide, which you probably can't read too well here, but it's, I believe, on your deck, he said, these are the larger items, that the route changes that needed to be made, whether it be ones that had probably a little too many children on it for overcrowding, where we were able to have to move a stop off and swap to another route. We had a lot of special education changes came in as the school year started, and those are a lot more difficult to place and put on the routes because they're more door to door. They're deeper into neighborhoods. Some of them are out of district placement, etc. So we did have to add a route with the route of 42 that was just running too long. That was a significant change that was implemented, and all of these changes on this sheet that I'm sharing with you have been implemented and are running today. And so without going through, I know there was an issue or concern raised about a YMCA bus. That is not a bus or buses that we provide. That's not a service we do within the community. I believe that's another organization that provides those. I did want to just clarify that and call that out. And I just want to jump to the last bullet point if I could. One of the things that is an open action item that we're working through right now is with our bus tracker app, where we communicate the expected arrival time or bus stop time. We're going to adjust the departure time. So it's not a change in the route time, it's a change in the actual data point in the system. to the actual departure. So we know that there's some schools where we in the third tier, the elementary levels, where they're actually leaving within that 15-minute window that we'll have for the on-time departures. And so that 15 minutes, if they leave at 3:45 rather than 3:30 or 3:35, that does change the actual published arrival time. And that's something that we need to correct. And we're doing that right now. We're updating the changes. It will not change the route. It won't change the time of arrival. It's just going to change the publication of the actual PM route drop-offs. So that's something that we've got to update and we're working on. We're going to implement the changes in the system next week, which will then produce and push the new data to the application. In speaking through, these are the significant changes or the items that we have worked through. Certainly I'm open to any feedback here today. If there's things that we're still experiencing, we have a lot of data, a lot of great data. We're going to share with you our GPS, our on-time report for all the schools, so you can see the anticipated arrival in the AM, the anticipated arrival and departure at the PM for all the schools. And at the top header, which we'll hand out here in a moment, it'll show what you have on your website as far as the start time in the morning and the PM bus time range. So we're going to give that out to you. So as I go through, I just wanted to briefly share with you some of the technologies and how we look at things. So we have what's called Zonar, which is a GPS system that's installed and it's dashboarded and interfaced with all of our softwares. We've got some proprietary softwares that we've got that this system actually gives us and pinpoints and archives all the location data, all the speed, their pre-post and child check performance, which those are safety checks and child checks. They actually have to scan and do some of that, and it captures all the information. And so I wanted to just share with you just some quick graphics and talking points through what that ground traffic control looks like. So we can, on the screen, show at any time where the vehicles are and where they're moving throughout the town, and specifically their direction they're heading, their speed, their stop data. And as I move through into our VersaTrans routing system, this is our software that we interface with your school district data and import over from your softwares into this routing software solution. It's very integrated. It's got a lot of the complex policies and rules set up. All of your school committee rules that you've had and expectations set, those mapping parameters are loaded in. So whether it be walking boundaries, walking rules, unsafe stops, unsafe crossings, those rules all get established and edited as we learn or modify through our experiences. Building times, all the student data information, etc., is all imported through this. And we build routes based on really the two #1 challenges is the time and capacity components. Trying to get up and down, north and south in the town, different times of the day with those traffic situations. And also really,
Excuse me, Steve.
yeah.
I apologize.
You want us to wait on questions or interrupt you?
No, please stop me.
I had a question. You talked about the school committee policy and rules, how that feeds into the system. How do you determine where bus stops actually are?
So great point. So we look at a number of factors. One, and the first and foremost, is safety. So we want to establish that we've got a good, depending on the number of students in the area, depending on the grade level, there's a number of factors that go into that, but certainly safety is a priority. We do have to send, in the state of Rhode Island, all the routes to the police department to get approved and vetted, and they certainly should give us a lot of feedback. We've had a number of experiences with that throughout the years of being in the community, so we historically know the areas that we want to target for the right bus stops. We try to avoid large group stops in a high traffic area. We try to move those if we can and maneuver them into a neighborhood if it's possible. But again, we've got the time components and factors as well. So each stop you make, there's a certain amount of process you have to go through, activating your warning lights a couple 100 feet before going into a red light. Obviously the monitor, getting off the bus, doing the 3-point check, all that. So it all adds time to the route. So the more stops we put in, the longer the route becomes.
So one of the complaints we hear from people who may not have kids, but people who are following buses, is that there are too many stops, and it's the perception is that there's door-to-door service, and I know for a fact that there's not. But how do you determine how far a student has to walk to the bus stop?
So the system will flag anything that's going to exceed what the policy is. So automatically we would say that you'd have to manually override it for that student to be routed to that stop if it was in fact a corner stop. So we look at obviously the walking distance. When you open up the student file in the software, it will show you home to school distance, home to stop distance, and it gives us those statistics. So we obviously try to keep everything very reasonable. Obviously, age drives that. I mean, when we have new routes and new students coming in, either at the K level or the first grade level, if we've got a neighborhood of upper classmen, whether it be fourth, fifth grade, we try to accommodate the stops more towards the younger children so that they have a less of a walk or less of an impact, so that the older children will walk to them. So sometimes a route in a neighborhood might move 3 or 4 houses down from prior year, and we're trying to accommodate that based on age. And sometimes there's misconceptions or perception issues of favoritism or door to door, and that's not the intent. It's really trying to minimize the distance between all of the students for that stop and trying to really host the younger children.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So as we build these in the system, I gave a quick screenshot sample. Obviously, I don't want to do a training session, but the Versatrans, this is your Cumberland High School route set, and this is what they'll look like on the map when they're all overlaid each other. And we can do a whole lot with this information. Obviously, the system will give us best estimates on time, but the software won't know Mendon Road in the afternoon. We have to know that. So there's some things that obviously logistics come into it from a software standpoint, but then it has to be vetted out from our drivers, our staff, and then when ridership comes in at the high school level, a lot of children drive their own cars. They get rides with their friends, so we have to adjust depending on who shows up. And sometimes throughout the seasons that changes. So if you've got people in after school, or students in after school sports, the ridership might be really low, and then all of a sudden in November, December, when colder weather's here, we'll see ridership spike up. So there might be some modification on the stop or adjustments still at that point. So some of it has to be a work in progress because you've got to understand who is going to use the bus and ride. We don't know. We get the student data. We route for maximum exposure on ridership. So sometimes we have to tweak that from the start. Going into the data and technology components, I wanted to just take you through kind of some of the information that's available to us at any time. So if there's concerns, parent complaints, principals, Superintendent Mitchell, anyone that's got concerns, we can really quickly go in and look at archive data from yesterday or last year. And so this is just a quick sample of our speed. If someone, and this happens often, especially on the flat nose buses, because there's a perception that they travel faster in neighborhoods, which is actually a thing. We can actually validate how fast they're going, and it's accurate within a half a mile per hour. And this is accurate from location, I think, accurate within 7 feet from a GPS perspective. All of our data updates in, I don't even know the milliseconds, but it's very quick. So we actually do a lot of speed validations. We get daily reports on it. We coach drivers if there's anybody that's getting close to it. It's something very closely watch and monitor live time. Location standpoint and statistics, I showed that before. We can see where the bus is at any time. This is an important one I wanted to show you, the path and route data showing the stops. We can actually see every time the drivers open up the bus door and activate their lights and stop. So we know if they were there. We know what time they were there. We know how long they waited. And that's for every stop they make. So this is an example of a bus route the other day that was traveling around, I think it was Route 20 actually. Yeah, and so in the next screenshot is going to show you an example of me just drilling in on that specific bus stop. So I was actually able to click on one of those number 1 balloons, which is when the door opened. That's the bus stop, when it occurred, the exact time, the GPS, latitude, longitude. It's everything I need to know to validate whether it was really there. And again, this is all archived. I can go back and look at it.
Yeah, that was my question. So you can look at it every day.
I can tell you what we did a year ago. Yep. And so what I can do, and oftentimes...
Excuse me, I have a question, sorry. So this is going to sound like it's personal, and it's not. I question the data that is, if it's current or not, and that's used for some of these stops. And it's mostly because there's been a stop in front of my house for 3 years and I don't have kids in an elementary school anymore. I've asked about it and I've been told that there are students. So you could actually see if a bus stops there every day or not.
Yes, we can.
Could I get that information? Because
course we can.
if I'm wrong, I would love to be proven wrong, but I just don't understand why it's still showing up when there are no children on either side of me for, within a whole block. So I just don't get what data is being used to make that a stop.
Certainly. And what can happen, and I don't know your specific example, we love to look into that, definitely. What can happen and what does happen in certainly a lot of communities is where we route based on, like I said, the walking distance and the children that we have in our student file. What can happen is those students that are routed for that bus stop choose to walk to a different one. And that may not be the case with you. So that's something that we'd love to look into for. And certainly if it needs to be changed, change it.
I want to be clear. I don't care if there's a bus stop in front of my house. My point is just, I don't get what data is pointing to have one there. And so it makes me question all of it.
And in some cases, continuity, works well. And if there's no reason for a change and it's already within the existing route and the route hasn't been modified enough or a lot, we keep some of the existing stops the same because they're already approved by the police department, and we don't want to have to take it away and then have it reapproved. So sometimes we leave those just on the route if it doesn't affect it. If it significantly affects it, they come out. But I'd love to look into your example.
Okay. Thank you.
So you leave it even if there's no students, though? Like that's
so
the weird thing.
we try to get. It depends on, like I said, specifically the route. It could be left in the system as an active stop available to that grade or that school. It doesn't necessarily mean that we actually make that stop. So it's something that I'd like to look at for her example.
Yeah, I know you need to look at it to have an informed response. But I guess every year when we get the bus routes, my impression was that you take the students for that year and you come up with the routes that are best for them.
We do.
What you're saying is sometimes there may be stops that are left over from the year before, or the year before that, or the year before that, which would describe what Mrs. Goggin.
Yeah, in those cases, they shouldn't have been published, if that's an example.
Got it.
So I think it's something that I do need to look at.
Thanks.
In a case where if there's a question on how we're doing with a route or the stops that are being made, we can export out a quick report. We can actually put it right into Excel. And this is what we call a path report, which shows the location. It shows, I've filtered it so it just shows the doors opening and closing, which means there's actually a bus stop. And I've also removed the actual address for privacy reasons. But this is an example of something that we can share. So if there's a question, certainly it can be communicated with you guys. And then we have what's called an on-time report. And this is actually a screenshot of what we're going to hand out and share with all of you, so you can kind of look at that and at your leisure question it. If you want to come back and speak with us, or certainly come back or have a subcommittee meeting, whatever we need, would love to talk about it further if we need to. So Francisco's going to hand out copies of that. Thank you, Francisco.
So on that one that you're showing, and this was just one day, I imagine, right?
Yes. This is actually for last week, the entire week.
So the target time is arrival is 7:15, but all of these basically arrived before 7. And
at the high school, yeah.
Yeah, and we're worried about kids getting starting school too early. But what this is showing is that they're getting to school before they even have to be there. Significant 15 minutes in every case except 2 or 3. Yeah, I mean this is sort of alarming to me that they're getting there so early. So kids are at the stop that early, earlier than they need to be. And we always talk about kids getting more sleep. Well, we have a problem with our high school start times, but we're making it worse by picking them up too early.
So those buses have to go on and do the middle schools, North and McCourt, and they have to go on for a third tier. So the timing of all those tiers have to be, it has to flow through. So for the route drop off, this is what we have to back up the times in order for us to make the deliveries.
So the target time is not the time on the schedule; it's the time school starts. Is that right?
Yeah, the target time, the school time, that's the bell time, right? So what we want to do is get them there before the bell. Some of them have either a breakfast program or we want them there early. They have to go to their locker. There's things they have to do before the actual bell time.
I guess like 6:48, when school starts at 7:15, the target time is 7:15. Is really early, and
That's what time the bus is pulling into the geofence, into the zone.
okay, that's not the time the door opens when they.
That's not the time the door opens.
Thank you.
What I'll, if it's okay, I'd like to jump on to the next section here. So I wanted to talk about DriveCam, which is a system that we're actually installing right now in the next, I think, 60 days. This is a safety feature and a benefit to all of us as far as improving the quality of safety within our organization. It helps protect our drivers, and it makes sure that our drivers do the right things. So this system is it's an internal device that looks forward out the windshield, looks backwards. It measures inertia and certain events, whether there's hard braking, stopping, turning, and all that. And it will give out alerts. So if there's any bad behaviors or good behaviors, a lot of positive coaching, reinforcement, people cut them off. This is going to record 7 seconds or 14 seconds of time, really to kind of allow us to see what's happening both forward and backwards. So great tool. This is something we're implementing across the country. Really going to help improve safety and really help with our drivers. And then the last piece that I wanted to kind of point through and then take on any questions that you may have further is we've talked a lot about student management camera systems. Superintendent Mitchell has talked about the expectations and have the ability to see behavioral challenges or situations on the bus. I think our requirements, I think that it only speaks to having 6. I think we have a little over 10 or 10 systems installed on the buses. We're going to go ahead and actually this school year and install new Xeon camera systems in the rest of the fleet and put those in really good high quality digital day, night mode, all that with audio. And we're going to do that at no additional cost for you guys to get that done as quick as we can for you so that all buses can be monitored and observed with any incidences that may happen or occur.
Steve, when I'm looking at this report, the bus number is under the first 3 of the asset. Is that what I'm looking at?
A lot of times that's the route number. That's
Right,
so it's a
if I'm
long
looking for bus 34 community.
bus 34 community.
Like,
On,
if I find
okay,
the community buses, I could probably, process of elimination. But
okay. So bus 34 community on
will it be the 034-30437?
yeah. So the third page and the stack.
Yep.
If you look, it's probably I think it's the 5th one or 6th one down.
That's what I'm getting to. So the asset number is reflecting the bus number.
The first 3
First 3
should be in most cases the route number, unless a spare bus or another bus is shifted in on that route for that day.
So I'm looking on the first page, 3/4 down, Joseph L. McCourt Middle School. It's an S-007. So what bus number would that be?
That's a spare bus, so I'd have to go look for that day which one that was covering. So there's obviously some cross reference that I would have to do and look up, but this is showing our arrival times at all the buses for all the schools. So if specifically there's a certain set of buses or a certain school, I can certainly provide more specific data and filter it for that school, AM, PM. I mean, I tried to give you guys an entire week of data so that you can look at both AM and PM at all the schools to really look at any concerns. Obviously, this is something that we want to meet with and be a part of. So if there is concerns, that we can work through them and address them
right now. Mrs. Goggin.
I have some questions about, it sounded like you do some of these manually, and I'm wondering about some of the time length that some students are on a bus, and it looks like bus 19, for example, you change the route so the first one's on or the first one's off. And there seem to be a lot of instances where you're reversing it instead of just running the same route. And when it makes sense, do it. But when it doesn't make sense, we end up with kids who are on the bus like 40, 50 minutes both ways, where you could easily reduce one end of their time. So do you look at that? Like, I know, I don't know what bus number to call it anymore. It was bus 34 last week. I think it's 28 or 29 this week. And it's a mile from school. it's easy enough to run the same route both ways without really going out of the way. You're always within a block. And so that's just an example.
Certainly. So what we do in those situations is oftentimes in the morning, if you're the first one on, sometimes in the afternoon, you're the last one off. That can be a pretty standard practice, but we also have to look at where that bus needs to go at the next tier. And so sometimes we need the bus to be closer to the south end, so we have to reverse the route.
So this example I'm using, it's a third tier school, and whichever way you go, you end up about 7 houses apart, leaving that neighborhood, going out back out onto Nate Whipple. So it doesn't, that answer isn't really relevant here, if you know what I mean. So.
Yeah, and certainly I'd love to look at that route. Are you saying that is bus 19 now? So 34 I think switched with 29, I think. Okay. We'll do that as a takeaway and look at it and get back with you. Yep. Lantern. Certainly.
Mr. DeMonica?
Steve, I have to ask,
Yes.
why does it take Durham so long to get the schedule right? I have to ask that. We're 4 weeks from the start of school, and we're still tinkering with the buses. I'm losing confidence that Durham Bus is the bus company that the school department needs. I mean, Paul and Ian are very receptive when I get down there, call them or text them, but you're losing confidence with us. I mean, what is the issue? We're 4 weeks out, and we're still tinkering here.
Don't want that situation to occur, certainly don't. And I apologize for that. When we met, I think a little over a week ago, and I came in, we had a lot of the actions that I listed on this page already vetted and ready to implement. And actually some of the mistakes, and I'll call this out here, we tried to implement change in some cases too fast and didn't allow enough time to communicate. So where we made phone calls and left voicemails, and we made a change, and it was all happening and really in some cases too quickly. So we need to make sure that the change we're making is properly communicated and we don't rush those. So the changes were being implemented. A number of the ones that you actually, I think, spoke to at your last session, we had already had implementations and plans to change. I think there, as I spoke to earlier, there is definitely some uniqueness with the timing of your tiers and your system. It's something that is absolutely a challenge, and certainly looking at the ridership counts and trying to see where your heavier capacity situations or neighborhoods are going to occur, it does force us to do changes pretty quickly on, and those should happen much quicker than they have.
Does Versa Trans, I mean, does it realize when you put 60 kids on a bus that you're gonna take forever to get those 60 kids picked up and dropped off at school?
It does factor in so many seconds, both per child and per stop. But some stops might have 15 or 20 kids just at one stop. And it's like more of a depot kind of corner stop. So in those situations, we look at that, and obviously, if there's more of a unsafe situation where they can't walk to a corner stop and there's a lot more of specific neighborhood stops, that does factor in, and then the actual capacity count will go down, and we'll have less children riding, and the route will still be longer because of the time we need to make each of the stops.
Just one final question. This would be for your regional manager for Rhode Island. Are we the only school district that are experiencing all these issues, or just the way it is?
I don't believe you are the only district that is experiencing this type of issue. It does happen in most of the district. The month of September usually is the month that is used to fine-tune the bus routes and make sure that any issue that occurred with the start of school is being addressed. So when you come across October, everything is up and running smoothly.
Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. We have it on our agenda tonight for a discussion and a vote to approve the school bus route, but as of right now. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hess. Go ahead.
If I can just make some observations, one of the things that jumps out at me is that your target arrival time is the start time of school. And that seems insane to me. Obviously, it's going to take some time to get the children off the bus. It's going to take some time to get the children into the school. It's going to take some time to get them into their desk. And your target time is when the teacher starts teaching. So even if you hit your target times and you arrive at 8:59 for a school that starts at 9 o'clock, those students are late to school. So I would say that you need to adjust your target times, and I'm not suggesting I know what that time needs to be, but I would have some conversations with the school principals and figure out how long it takes to get a student from the bus to their desk and ready to learn, and that should be your target time. Because if you're,
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
if you're dropping them off, I mean, you have some here that are getting, 8:59 when they're supposed to be starting school at 9 o'clock. That student, from my standpoint, is late.
So we route those in Versatrans. We actually have what we have as an anchor time and a drop-off time. So there's their bell time report, and then there's the actual anchor or expected arrival time. We do adjust those based on like certain breakfast programs, certain schools, certain traffic situations at the schools, especially with parent drop-offs. There can be a lot of congestion. So we do target earlier than the bell. This report is just giving us an export of our data, and it's showing me just the bell time. What we route is to an earlier arrival time. So an example of like an 8:59 drop-off, we don't want that either. And so we actually met with one of the special education coordinators at the high school. Superintendent Mitchell arranged that, and we were actually talking to try to get drop-offs differently or arranged differently at the high school, which would allow us to improve some of the other tier times. So that's something that we constantly are trying to monitor, and if we can adjust it, or if we have to back up the route 5 minutes, sometimes we do that, just so we make sure that they're not getting there at 8:59. I wouldn't consider that on time either.
Okay. I mean, one of the other things that jumps out at me, I mean, there's a lot of data to go through here, but even just if you jump to the fourth to the last page, you've got a bus arriving at Community, if it's accurate, a half an hour after school starts. There's a bus that arrived at 9:27, and then if you go down to Cumberland Hill, you've got one arriving at 9:07 and 9 o'clock. I mean, this is, as Mr. DeMonica said, we're 3 weeks into the school year. I think it's unconscionable if we have buses, unless you had a mechanical breakdown, that are arriving 10 to 30 minutes after the start of school. I mean, I'm not unappreciative of the difficulty and the logistics of trying to navigate thousands of kids around the town, but at the same time, that is what you get paid to do. That is what you guys are experts in. One of the things I find concerning is, as I've been on this committee, is we've gone back and forth about discussing whether or not we need to hire a transportation director to deal with all of the things that go on with the buses. And what strikes me is that's your job, that's your company, that's why we hired you, that's why we no longer employ school bus drivers, is because we hired a transportation expert to manage this. And yet our superintendent spends a fair amount of his time dealing with all of the things that come up as a result of this. And absent what's been said by the committee, it's my general sense you don't have a good reputation in the community. You've been our bus company for a number of years, but I don't hear a lot of good things said, and I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just telling you that what the sense is in this town, that there's problems every year. In some cases, there are people who complained about problems that literally lasted their child's entire academic career that were never addressed. There are issues that crop up year after year in certain areas, and it's concerning to me. I mean, there's a lot of data here and everything, but to Mrs. Goggins' point, I'm trying to grasp how this is addressing the issues that we have with all of this data, all of the information, all of your expertise, all of the technology. We're still running into problems where it takes a month to solve all of these transportation problems. We had kids last year, I mean, it was more than a month, that buses were consistently showing up late. And besides the fact that I don't think the school department's getting what it's paying for in the contract, we're shortchanging the students their education. So it's not just the money we paid to you to get the students there safely and on time, but the money we're paying the teacher isn't being utilized. And absent all of the money, the child is being denied the education that they deserve. And that's where, again, I think we all take it very personally. I'm not suggesting you don't, but the kids need to get to school on time, and it needs to happen fast. And I don't necessarily care how it gets done. I mean, we've heard a lot of things from Mr. Neves over the years about the things they're going to address, but it just needs to get done. And I think if for whatever reason Durham is unable to get it done, then certainly it would behoove the district to look to see if someone else can. Because what concerns me the most is that we don't, we hear the difficulties of driving up and down the town, although absent what's going on in Diamond Hill, the length of the roads hasn't changed, traffic patterns haven't changed dramatically. The town is the town. But I don't hear a lot of, we need more buses. I don't hear that there's anything that we can do to help you. I just hear it's a really difficult and it's a hard problem to solve. And yet, demonstrably, other towns are getting it done. Their kids are getting to school on time. And yet we seem to, every year, it's just, there's busing problems. And I want to understand how we can move past that so that the busing problems are minor and not actually impacting the students' ability to be educated. Thank you.
Well said, Mr. Hess. Mrs. Goggin?
I just have one more comment question. It could probably be filed under what's done is done, but the fact that it happened really kind of still upsets me. On September 10th, a bus left North Cumberland Middle School in the afternoon, and instead of doing what looks like about a 10-minute run going and turning left, it turned right, went to the high school, picked up kids, and then came back, resulting in kids getting home, like I said, it's about a 10-minute run. They got home another 25 minutes late, so it was over 35 minutes. Nobody told, it doesn't sound like anyone told the kids. Kids were calling their parents saying we're going the wrong way. We don't know why. Kids were late for practice. People had to find their kids and meet them at another stop to get them off the bus to get them places on time. And I was told it was a one-time deal, but I wasn't really told why did this happen? How could this possibly happen? And it shouldn't have happened in the first place.
I'll have to look into that one. I apologize. I don't know that situation.
Steve, you had mentioned a geo area when your buses get to a certain area. Can you explain that a little bit more? Is it just at the school? Do you have a program for a quarter mile away?
Now, the geofences are actually drawn around the actual expected arrival area on the property. We don't want them near a street because if you're just driving by, we don't want it triggering a geofence alert. So they're actually, we open them up on a Google map and we zoom in on the buildings. And so if we're going to drive around the back and load or unload in that area, we actually draw geofencing around that specific area. Thank you. You're welcome.
You had mentioned that some of our policies are making things slower, right? But in your effort to meet our policies, it's causing issues. And I don't know if that's the start times of the schools or whatever. From your perspective, what changes should we look at to improve travel time to school, to and from school?
Well, I don't think I said your policies are causing. I think what's a challenge within the community is certainly the bell time and the tiering between it. And it's difficult because you do have a very early high school start time. And so when you look at that, the time window in the morning, which can be greater or easier met, the PM might be more complicated. So there is a bit of a challenge. So when we talk through routing changes or what could we do different, there are certain things that we could change or present or provide, maybe some efficiency studies and more information, to your point, on what could look at a more long-term solution.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I didn't mean to put words in your mouth. I thought you said
No, that's
policies,
okay.
but I imagined it was the bell times that are the big issue. The other question I have is, when a parent has a question about buses, they have an issue with the bus, who should they be contacting? Because here's what happens. I think we tell them to contact the superintendent or Durham, right? There may be a dual message. A lot of times they contact us, the school committee. Personally, I can't do anything about busing. All I can do is hand off the request to someone else. My sense is the superintendent is in a similar boat. I think it's great for Mr. Mitchell to be able to have a sense of the issues, but he's likely, and sorry, Mr. Mitchell, but he's likely to be working with Durham to fix any problems. It's not like he can just wave a wand and fix a bus route. So from your perspective, what's the right approach for a parent, or the right avenue for a parent who has an issue? And then how do other districts handle this? Is it the same way, or
It's a combination. It varies. Some districts have part-time coordinators. They might do one responsibility within the district, but then they also manage some of the policy vetting within the district, because I may hold your standards to the specifics of, they're allowed to walk this distance to the bus stop, they're allowed to have this eligibility rule, and if I say that that's the rule and I'm enforcing your rules, at some point they've got to be able to go to the one that's enforcing it. So sometimes that's where you have a liaison or someone that'll say, okay, this is what we're going to do or not do. What I would like to do here, honestly, to improve the situation is present or provide Superintendent Mitchell some more information about me implementing a feedback system here, a web-based feedback system, where it would be it's www.busreport.com, and so that anybody can come in there and log it, and it goes through our systems, and it's both complementary or we have issues, and you would log those through, and those get escalated through our local team, and then if they're not vetted properly, up the chain through, so that we see response and actions taken. It's something I think that would be very beneficial here. But it's something we'd have to communicate. We'd have to share that, give it out to the public, whether we put a link on your website. If you guys approve of it, I'll get you some more materials to share, and then see if that's the right fit for this community. I think it would be great, because we could give you statistics on how many complaints, how many issues, what the theme is, if it's stop related, time related, behavior,
is there
whatever.
an additional cost for that?
For you, no.
And
It's a public record, Steve.
I know, you got me
being
recorded.
No, and the bus tracker app.
Yep.
I'm not sure that was really announced to parents. I know that parents found it last year and started using it, and then word of mouth spread on Facebook and other social media. What do you typically do to tell parents that it's available? And are you still seeing success in other districts with it? Like, is it still a positive thing that we should be encouraging parents to use?
Yeah, it really is reducing the number of calls. That's what it generally typically does. Is there's an understanding of what the expectation is. They can, a parent or even children can look at it and say, okay, the bus is still on such and such a street. I haven't missed it. It's coming. And so it does alleviate some of the calls about where's the bus or is it running late, and it does help us a lot. So if there's not been an effective communication rollout, then we will give you and the partner with the district whatever we need to give out more information, because I have parent FAQs. I've got a lot of information that we could launch through the schools so that everybody knows about it.
I think that would be worthwhile, and I imagine our email system would be used. It would be a good avenue for that. What do other districts do for communicating with parents about this? What's your preferred way? If Cumberland says we want to let our parents know about this, what would you tell us to do?
I mean, if you've got a email communication system, I don't know what all of your capabilities are, but obviously I think an electronic path is the best way for communications. That and the all-call reminder of look in the backpack. We handed this out today. I don't know what the systems are, but certainly that's the best method. We could look at meeting with principals as well to educate them at their level in case there's any questions as well. So there's a number of ways we could do it. But certainly I think electronic would be the best method.
work on that, that would help. Thank you. I'm just worried that we're sort of spending so much time, our administration is spending so much time on these issues. I know it's the high month, right? September, as you said, one of you said that, that's when issues are worked out, but, we're spending an inordinate amount of time on this stuff. And we want parents we want to be responsive to them, but we want to make sure that their message goes to the right person to begin with, and not that it's, daisy chained around. So I think anything we can do to help that would help out.
Certainly. Mr. DeMonica?
Steve, can we give the parents of Cumberland your cell phone number and email address to call?
I think what we'll do is implement the bus report. I think that is absolutely the way I will get visibility to it.
Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. Steve, as you can tell, this is a priority. We're a month into school. We need to approve these reports. We'll be back here in 2 weeks. Do you foresee any other problems? Or do you think everything on your actions and follow-up slide will be taken care of?
Yeah, as those are all addressed, those are all behind us as far as concerns. Anything that's coming in for feedback, we're addressing immediately the same day. We're contacting parents. We're even going back and following up with parents that had an issue a few days ago just to say, hey, how's it going, to make sure. Okay. So we're trying to absolutely be proactive on making sure that anything we're aware of, we're addressing. Certainly anything that Superintendent Mitchell or anybody hears, I'm being privy to it, Francisco, myself, and we're all following up with that immediately. I am not aware of any large changes needed or any significant revamps. As you know, that we'll continue to look at whatever information, validate whatever the concern might be that for that day, and if there's adjustments needed, we'll make them. But I don't anticipate anything large at this point. I feel we've got a lot of the big obstacles out of the way. There'll be a lot of feedback. Maybe people think a route should be modified or changed, or they don't like what it's doing today. We're still going to address some of those.
Mr. Denon.
I have one more question about capacity on the buses. Yep. A standard middle school bus, a full bus, how many students should be on that bus?
It depends on the capacity of the bus that's on the route. So typically, I think you've got mostly 71 passenger. You might have some 84s that are down here, which that is what by federal standard means a 13-inch rear. Okay. Each child has a 13-inch. As you go up in grades, obviously the capacity should go down because the kids get bigger. So on a middle school,
is that 2 per seat or 3 per seat?
It's 3 per seat.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that from my own son that his bus is really full and it's hard. It's a challenge, and I don't know what to tell him. Like he has to sit, can't stand, and it's just a full. And at the same time, we always hear that our buses are empty or frequently empty. And I think, that doesn't apply to his bus, and it mostly applies to older kids. He's in middle school. What were you going to say? I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry.
No problem. So it really depends. On a 71 passenger, you can get upwards of 60 to 65 kids legally in there, and then 3 to a seat. But that does, pose challenges based on size of the children in certain situations. Our drivers are instructed that they're not supposed to ever leave a school if there's an overload situation, or if they get to a stop and it's going to take them over a certain capacity, they're supposed to stop and call dispatch. And that has happened. They've shown up to an event and they said, I can't take all these kids. We're not fitting in here. Send another bus.
But can they be half on a seat and half off a seat? I think that's really the issue. Right?
That becomes more of behavioral management, as far as because you can have one kid in the seat and they kind of sit half in the aisle or not. They shouldn't be. They're supposed to be in the seat.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking that 3 to a seat may not actually fit those 3, and one has to half be on the seat. That's my concern. I think you're right. I mean, the kids are not little at this age. And I know there's a big range between 6th and 8th grade between kids, but and then it sounds like the capacity. So 71 would have 60 kids on it.
Yeah, it certainly could. Like as you go up to high school, it gets that number will drop down. So okay. It varies. On the elementary level, we go right up in the high 60s on the elementary level because the children are smaller.
And then when there's a monitor on the bus, so elementary kids, K through 5, right, is required to have a monitor. What are the rules for a monitor in checking, like the underneath the bus and every corner of the bus. And what is required by law? Do you know? Do you
Yeah,
know?
so the monitors in the town here are your employees, and so we actually were talking earlier about working and partnering and sharing a lot of our training materials so that they have the standard material that we share with our employees and aides and monitors. They're supposed to do a 3-point check. They're supposed to be looking under the wheels before we depart a stop. And they're obviously on the bus to manage situations, whether it be behavioral or assist a child, whatever. When the bus is not moving, we don't want them up and walking around while the bus is in motion.
Point check your guidelines, or is it state law?
No, that's state law. Rhode Island's the only state that I'm aware of that requires and mandates bus monitors K through 5.
Yeah, I looked at the state law, and all I could find was that they're mandated to be there, and I couldn't find anything about what they're supposed to do.
I can see if we have material as far as what it stipulates exactly. I know our trainers are going to know it like the back of their hand.
And don't get me wrong, I just want to find out, because a lot of times we hear that that slows down a bus route, right?
It does.
And more times than not, in the younger buses, the buses with younger kids, there are parents there, and maybe when those laws were passed, the parents didn't all go to the bus stop, but basically every bus stop, most bus stops have parents there. I still think that we need the bus monitors, so that's not an issue, but I'm just trying to make things more efficient.
Yeah, we cannot modify that because even when they're crossing, they have to go out to the center lane on the opposite side. They've got to do hand signals to motion to cross. There's a lot of very specific requirements that the state of Rhode Island requires as far as, and that 3-point check. So you're right, when you're following that down a road, that bus, that stop, that check is an important critical safety check, but that's something we can't modify. So it takes time.
So one other, and I'm sorry, this will be my last thing, but I've heard that like when buses go down a road and they have a line of cars behind them, it seems like some of the buses will pull over and let the cars pass, but it's not a general rule. And do you have a guideline for that? If it's safe for that to happen, and because we don't want to create 20 cars behind a bus if we can avoid it. And do you have a guideline to give your drivers about that?
I have mixed feelings about that because if I ask them to pull over every time there's traffic, you're going to have late buses. And so at some point we have to commit and do the route as prescribed because it's going to run late. They're already tight as they are. So, I mean, from a courtesy standpoint, I would love every safe opportunity for them to get out of the way and let kind of the community go and not be that hassle. But certainly I think there's some safety concerns of where we do that. Where do you pull off? Not on someone's lawn. Those kind of things that really come into a concern and a factor for me to, I don't know this is a standard answer. I would love it to be like the middle of nowhere, they can pull over and get out of the way, but that might
there are a couple places I can think of that are like under 295 where I think in the past buses used to pull over, but it may be a new driver now and they don't. And so that's what's been reported to me. And I know you can't know every detail about these routes. I agree that we need to be safe, and if we stopped every time there were 2 cars behind a bus, we would have really late arrivals. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Steve, I will say this, every time I do stop by to see Paul or I'm in the area, the drivers that I do see and the office staff are the most professional, friendly, courteous. The bus driver for in my area is very friendly. I was behind a bus on Little Pond County Road, and I think I was telling Steve and Bill, it was probably about 20 cars before somebody let this bus go. Nobody's cutting brakes. And I'm looking at the time, it was like 2.5, 3 minutes right there. So if somebody had let that bus go, they'd probably be 2 to 3 minutes earlier to the school, but nobody's got, the courtesy to let a bus go. So, all right. So we look forward to an update, I guess in 2 weeks. I'm not sure if we're going to pass this tonight. It's on the agenda. We're going to leave it up to the committee. Anybody else? Anything else to say? Gentlemen, anything else to say in regards to this? Mr. Mitchell?
I'm good. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback. Appreciate it.
Next item on the agenda, discussion and a vote to approve homeschool instruction requests for the 2018-19. Go back to the old business? Okay, I apologize. We'll go back to the old business. Discussion and a vote to approve 2018-19 school bus routes.
Second.
Monica makes a motion to table, a second by Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Denon makes a motion to table. Mr. DeMonica seconds. All in favor? Against? The ayes have it, 5-0. We're going to table. So we're going to prove that we're tabling the school bus routes in 2 weeks. We're going to get an update by Mr. Mitchell. We'll be in touch before that, and hopefully we can get this passed and move forward. So thank you. Next item on the agenda, discussion and a vote to approve amended policies. J1 early entry of kindergarten in first grade. Mr. Hess.
So I discussed this policy earlier. Again, the key modification to this policy would be to align Cumberland's admission to kindergarten to align with the state law, which is September 1st. Just to follow up on what Ms. Waters said, I would editorialize by saying that we had a lengthy discussion with Dr. Santa, our special ed director, with regard to the test that is given currently and how accurate a predictor that is of student success. She felt very strongly that it is not an accurate predictor of potential student success. She also discussed at length really the key differentiator in her mind, in her experience, with regard to student success isn't intellect, but rather social and emotional maturity, and that there isn't a really good test available, as I recall, to test that. So somebody might do well on the intellectual and academic test, but not really be ready for that dynamic. And the way that she described it to us is that a large number, if not the majority of people that sought out these waivers for the September 1st guideline were really looking at it more from a daycare standpoint, that it wasn't necessarily driven by the academic aspects of it, but it was, there's definitely some cost savings there and other aspects that come into it. But she was very firm in her belief that the way it was set up was setting up a potential disservice for the majority of people that would apply for it, that the parents, while well-meaning, may not necessarily be doing the best by their child. Just speaking from a personal standpoint, going back, I won't say how many years, but when I was entering kindergarten as the youngest of 4 boys, at the time it was December 1. My birthday's in October, so at the time, my mother was actually given the option, you can start him now or you can hold him back. And she made the decision to hold me back. Personally, I think that was the right one. My wife would probably agree. Even now, I'm not that mature. So, but I think Dr. Santa, at least from my perspective, made a very good argument in favor of setting this rule. I will say that I did bring up to Superintendent Mitchell as we had these discussions that I do have a concern related to exactly what you're describing, that, okay, well, what happens when you have a child who is advanced, and we now have demonstrable evidence that they're advanced. And I think that's, and I intimated to him that I think it's something the district needs to be cognizant of. And from my perspective, it's after the child's there that a kindergarten teacher could say, yes, this student is well beyond and would benefit from some sort of advancement. So at least from my perspective, and it's something I'll continue to pursue, that we do try to ensure that students who show proficiency above grade level, that there is an answer for that, that they aren't held back just because of where they fell in. But at any rate, just to answer what she brought up, that being said, as I went over the policy, it did pass 3-0 in the policy committee, and I would move passage based on that.
Mr. Hess makes a motion for the passage of J1 early entry to kindergarten in first grade. Do I have a second?
Second for discussion.
Second for discussion by Mrs. Goggin.
Mr. Hess stole most of what I was going to say, but yeah, I've really struggled with this as well, and I just I feel the need to say the line is arbitrary. It's September 1st. There's nothing that says a child born September 2nd is any less ready than the one even born on May 1st, and it was said at one meeting that there's no advantage for a student to start early, and I just think it really ignores the frustration of being bored in a class and kind of shows a lack of understanding for that type of student. That being said, I look forward to what you just said, a Cumberland program that has systems in place for these students that, when they finally do enter kindergarten, they're not bored and they're able to show a year's growth. They're able to show that they're being challenged. I feel like over the last 15 years, programs have been cut that address these types of kids, and I think it's really unfortunate. And we say the population is really small, but we're spending a whole lot of time on this policy just to address that population. So that's all.
Thank you. There was a first and a second, so this is still discussion. I think it's worth pointing out that this came in part from our kindergarten teachers. Right, they're requesting this change. They did an informal survey among themselves. I don't remember the exact numbers, but a vast majority of them wanted this in place. And I think 100% of them said that there were social and emotional issues that they were worried that their primary concern was social and emotional issues. So this didn't come from us. At this point, it'll become our policy if it does pass. But I think it's important to know that it's coming from the teachers who are in the classroom and who are teaching our kids.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, number 2, I-13 high school proficiency grading. Mr. Hess.
Okay, so once again, this passed 3-0 in policy. The primary adjustment here is to rework the language around the automatic retakes. Again, this was at the request of the administration based on their experience and feedback, and I would move passage.
Mr. Hess makes a motion for the passage of I-3 high school proficiency grading. Do I have a second?
Second for discussion.
Second by Mr. Denon for discussion. Mr. Denon.
And I actually just want to read the line that is in the new policy that applies to retakes or reassessments. It says students must be allowed multiple opportunities, e.g. formative, summatives, and reassessments with teacher discretion to show what they can know and can do. Teachers must be committed to these principles. So the key here is that reassessments or retakes are not automatic. The key line there is reassessments with teacher discretion. There were some other changes in there as well, but that's the big one. So the district's not getting rid of reassessments. We're just leaving that to the teacher's discretion to allow them. So I already seconded it. So
excellent. Thank you, Mr. Denon. We have a motion. We have a second.
Could I say,
Mrs. Goggin.
I also just want to point out that when we're in policy subcommittee, there was a lot of talk about what these formatives should be looking like, progress assessments, whatever we want to call them. And to make it clear for parents, and hopefully this will be communicated to them, that before every summative, all material should be assessed at a formative level and given meaningful feedback. So if there is a deficiency in learning, it should be addressed before the summative, and hopefully take away a need for a retake, because teachers are on top of what their students know.
Excellent. We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor? Against? The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hess. Excellent job filling in. Make Mr. Fiorillo proud. Next item on the agenda, under new business, discussion and or vote to approve homeschool instruction request for the 2018-19 school year. Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend approval.
How many do we have, Mr. Mitchell?
I think I actually have that number if you just bear with me.
Nine.
There were yeah, I think there were 9. There were 9 in total. However, I think there were 3 renewals. One of the renewals today decided to return to the high school. So they're actually, instead of 3 renewals. There were actually only 2 renewals.
Pleasure of the committee. Mr. Dennett makes a motion to approve. Second by Mr. Hess. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 5-0. Next item on the agenda, discussion and a vote to approve amended policy. J21, FERPA policy for those students who have reached the age of majority. Mr. Hess.
Okay, so once again, the policy in this case is incredibly self-explanatory, and this did pass in a 3-0 vote in policy. This again brings us in line with state law and has some clarification language with regard to the fact that the FERPA I'll read it. There's a special note in here. The provision in FERPA that permits parents to continue to receive educational records and notice of educational activities for their child age 18 or older who attends a post-secondary institution does not create a separate right for that parent to attend a meeting or otherwise engage in educational decision-making process without the student's consent. So again, this just clarifies our policy with state language.
Excellent.
Passage.
Mr. Hess.
Second, there was a slight change.
Yep.
As you read it, you probably
yeah. As
realized
I was reading, I apologize. Yeah, the post-secondary institution part was stricken.
Want me to read it? The provision in FERPA that permits parents to continue to receive educational records and notice of educational activities for their child age 18 or over does not create a separate right for the parent to attend a meeting or otherwise engage in educational decision-making process without the student's consent. So what Mr. Hess read was a draft that we worked on in the meeting, and what came out of that was what I just read. What came out of the meeting. So we've had a first and a second.
Excellent. Sorry, Mr. Hess. Did a great job. We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, personnel recommendations. Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Chairman, I have 2 retirements. You want to do them individually or together?
We can do them together. Yeah.
I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the retirement of Pearl Kaplan, school nurse teacher at B.F. Norton Elementary School, with an effective date of June 30th, 2019, after 28 years of service. And I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the retirement of Maureen Orabone, classroom paraprofessional at the preschool center, with an effective date of September 4th, 2018, after 14 years of service. Recommend approval.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Pleasure of the committee. Mr. Hess makes a motion to approve on the 2 retirements, second by Mr. DeMonica. All in favor? Against? Ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you. Mr. Mitchell.
I have 1 resignation, Mr. Chairman. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the resignation of Bridget Siegel, special education teacher at North Cumberland Middle School, effective September 20th, 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Pleasure of the committee. Looking for a motion to accept the resignation. Mr. DeMonica makes a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Denon. All in favor? Against? The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have 3 leaves of absence. If you don't mind, I'll give you all 3.
Please.
I request the advice and consent of the Cumberland School Committee on the unpaid leave of absence of Melissa Crissione, classroom paraprofessional at John McLaughlin Cumberland Hill School, effective August 28, 2018, for the 2018-19 school year. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the FMLA leave of absence of Jessica Delaney, secondary science teacher at Cumberland High School, with an anticipated leave date of November 26, 2018, and a return date of February 25th, 2019. And I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the FMLA leave of absence of Christina Silva, secondary English teacher at Cumberland High School, with an anticipated leave date of October 19, 2018, and a return date of February 4th, 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Pleasure of the committee and the 3 leave of absences. Mr. Hess makes a motion to approve the 3. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Denon. Thank you. All in favor? Against? The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you.
Mr.
And
Chairman,
last one, Mr. Mitchell.
I have 10 appointments. I request the advice and consent of the school committee and the appointment of Edwin Abreu, world language teacher, Spanish at Cumberland High School with an effective date of August 28, 2018 through the end of the 2018-19 school year. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of Janine Boisel, secondary English teacher at North Cumberland Middle School with an effective date of August 28, 2018 for the 2018-19 school year. Do you want the steps in the copay? Is that necessary?
We're going to refer back to the finance chair. Mr. DeMonica? Okay.
I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of Katie Coette, special education teacher, Strive program at North Cumberland Middle School with an effective date of August 28, 2018. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of Louis Sorello, secondary science teacher at Cumberland High School with an effective date of September 17, 2018. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of Allison Guerin, classroom paraprofessional at the preschool center with an effective date of September 17, 2018. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of Kathleen Harold, one-to-one paraprofessional at North Cumberland Middle School with an effective date of October 15, 2018. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of Nancy Henson, classroom paraprofessional at John J. McLaughlin Cumberland Hills School with an effective date of September 10, 2018. Excuse me. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of Jennifer Jubenville, reading specialist at Ashton School with an effective date of October 2nd, 2018 to the end of the 2018-19 school year. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of Angela Murcia, world language teacher, Spanish at Cumberland High School with an effective date of August 28, 2018 through the end of the 2018-19 school year. And last but not least, I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of Sandra Shaw, world language teacher, French at Cumberland High School with an effective date of September 7th, 2018 through the end of the 2018-19 school year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mitchell, one more time. I didn't get all the names. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Pleasure of the committee.
Motion to approve.
Mr. DeMonica makes a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Second by Mrs. Goggin. All in favor? Against? The ayes have it. 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Excellent job. Next item on the agenda, school committee comments, school liaison reports.
Chairman,
Mr. DeMonica.
I just got one. I should have noted that at the fiscal subcommittee meeting, we were going to ask Tedesco to send out again to the parents the free and reduced lunch information. If you don't know if you qualify or you think you may, please fill out the form. We have until October 1st, and if your child may have charged something in line and run up a little invoice here, it would get wiped away if it gets approved by October 1st. So we're going to let the public know one more time to please, if you think you may qualify, fill it out and get it back to the school district. It's all the information there is kept in confidential, so it's private, and it just works for the school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, can I just piggyback on what Mr. DeMonica said? And I think, you know, he was pretty clear that the process is confidential. Certainly the application process is confidential, but I think it's important for people to know that the entire, the process right through the child, you know, procuring the food, getting the food, that there's no way that anybody knows that a student is eligible for and has been found to be able to utilize that free and reduced lunch program. So I think that's really important, especially in the upper grades.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Anyone else? All right. Next item on the agenda, Mr. Mitchell, do we have executive session?
No, we do not, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is to adjourn. Pleasure of the committee. Mr. Hess makes a motion to adjourn. You're just filling in for Mr. Fiorillo right across the board. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. DeMonica. All in favor? Against? The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.